Okay, so the next one is Fort St. John Cabs, application to the Passenger Transportation Board to increase the fleet size. What is your wish? I think they need a,
Recommend municipalities comment within 5 days.
yeah, we do have to comment on it.
Is it possible to have a presentation by them?
No. So they put the application in on the 19th, is that what this is? Okay. So we have to either be in support or not. Councillor Boland.
Thanks, Your Worship. I would recommend we write a letter in support of them adding more taxi cabs. I mean, that's one of the larger complaints we see on social media, and their response has been a limit of licenses and a limit of access. So if this assists in that, I think we should support that.
I support the need for new cabs, and I would hope that this company would recognize that in supporting new cab companies as well.
They did not.
Yeah, we had issues with that before.
I'd like
So-
to, is it possible to ask them to provide further information? How many of their cabs are on the road? Like if they're all on the road and working, all their plates are being used?
It says 11. They operate 12 in the city, 11 and 1 voluntary.
But are they operational?
Yeah, that's,
That's your question.
They have the
Yeah.
licenses, but are they?
they have the licenses, but how many are on the road? That's what,
Oh, yeah, they're-
when does this have to be in by?
Oh, that's not.
Tomorrow.
Are there questions you want answered, council, before you approve this? Because you can approve it in principle, and I can send a letter of support pending that conversation. Councillor Christensen?
Thank you, Worship. I question when it says voluntarily, does that mean that accessible cab is not on the road, and if you require one, you may or may not get it? I'd like
don't
an
know.
explanation of that.
I'm not sure what voluntary means.
I don't know.
I do see it out and working.
City manager?
Thank you, Your Worship. Voluntary means that it's voluntary on behalf of the cab company to provide an accessible taxi. It's not a requirement of the municipality or of the province. So of the 11 taxis that are operating in the community, one is an accessible taxi. So this application or this notice, as well as the one in the next item of correspondence, indicate that Fort St. John Cabs would like to increase their number of taxis from 11 to 12. If you have questions or concern, I would recommend to council that you respond back that you will not approve this application until you get those questions answered. If you provide support, even if it's support subject to, then it just moves ahead to the next level.
So this, to me, says that they've got 12 in the Fort St. John area, 11 of them,
Regular.
because it says how many taxis, oh, do you want, so they want,
One more.
So they want one more.
They want one on
okay.
each.
So they
Operate
operate
now.
11, one of which is accessible.
Okay.
So they operate 10 plus 1, and they want to operate 11 plus this new one.
So they want one more on this license and one more on the other license.
Yes.
What's your wish?
Your Worship.
I'm good with the motion.
Okay. Councillor Stewart?
Question for City Manager. Is it possible for us to mandate that the cabs have, or the cab companies have accessible vehicles? Just in the way you worded it, we don't have anything that does that as a bylaw or such. And so with them asking for both companies for one more, if we're going to write anything up, can we state that our request is that it's an accessible cab?
Going through your vehicles for hire bylaw, yes, you can. Likewise, you could require that they have electric vehicles, like if you, again, based on environmental consideration, accessibility consideration. Already within your vehicles for hire, you designate the age of the vehicle, that they can't have a vehicle over a certain age limit. So yeah, you can put all those conditions within your bylaw. But at this point, it's not in the bylaw. You'd have to amend the bylaw. So in response to this, you couldn't arbitrarily say, but now we want 2 or 3 accessible taxis in response just to this application. You can direct staff to bring forward an amended bylaw. That applies in all future cases.
Okay, well, then my preference for us as council with any letter that we're gonna write, that we ask that these additional taxis would be accessible taxis if they're gonna add to their fleet. So that we ensure that we have more services for all of our citizens.
So we need to change the bylaw first.
Well, and then my second thing is but not to write a letter, we're asking them.
Oh, so you're
If they're
making,
gonna add, we would like this to happen. I think it's good for them to be looking at that as well and consider it. And then my second point is, yeah, I would like to staff bring the bylaw to us and we can look at changing that bylaw to have it in there. It won't affect this at this point, but it would affect going forward.
okay. Councillor Hanson.
So to further Councillor Stewart, I agree that having something that will help our seniors, handicapped, is definitely value, but I would welcome both taxi companies to come and explain to us what the costs are. Is it doable? Is it cost prohibitive? And I would be in favor of approving their application. It goes to the next level for a board, and it's my understanding that other taxi companies or those kind of services, that they have the option of submitting whether, if they feel that it's needed or not, if they have any disputes about more plates being given to these 2 companies. So if there is a concern about how many plates a certain company has, other companies or those involved in the transportation service has an opportunity to reply.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going through right now. So they're looking for our,
Stakeholder.
yeah. Okay. Councillor Clausen.
Thanks, Your Worship. I don't know if Councillor Stewart was making a recommendation whether we needed to do that. Okay, all right.
So you want a friendly amendment to the motion that they consider more accessible vehicles?
Well, they're asking for one for this company and one for the next company.
Yeah.
If it's accessible, in my mind, an accessible vehicle is good for all persons, able-bodied or not. So if we request that their additional, if it goes forward, is an accessible taxi cab.
So since my mic is on, I would agree with that as a request, and our support would be subject to that. Having said that, I'm feeling like we're a little bit put behind the 8 ball, having to make a decision whether to write a letter of support with basically saying we need it today. So I'm actually not in favor of writing a letter of support. It could be something like what Councillor Stewart suggested, because I think we're in agreement to that. But I mean, there are the stats, the competition, the electric vehicle. There's so many pieces of this that I don't feel like coming here and just saying, yes, we'll support it or not, with basically a couple minutes to discuss it doesn't really give us enough time.
Yeah, there's, I have a bit of an issue with making this kind of a decision. And all we have here is 2 pages. And it's come from Tico Taxi, but it's referring to Fort St. John.
It's both. One's for St. John Cabs, one's Tico Taxi.
So it's the same company.
Same owner, different companies.
And I'll just add to my comment just quickly. I think even if there was, as you say, there's 2 pages, it shows us the application, but even if there was some written rationale for why they're wanting this or some plan, that would make it easier for me. But at this point, I just don't have enough information to even write a letter of support personally.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we don't actually have a recommendation on the floor indicating support. So I have the Director of Administrative and Legislative Services.
So just for clarification purposes, those were the only documents that the city received on October the 19th. And as you can imagine, that was Thursday agenda day, so you're correct. There isn't enough time, and unfortunately, that's part of the Passenger Transportation Board's application process.
Okay. Councillor Stewart.
I understand the discomfort, but I think we would all be in favor of adding more taxis. Just hopefully they have drivers and those taxis are on the road. So I will make a recommendation that we send a letter, but that it outlines that our request would be that these additional taxis would be accessible taxis for all individuals, abled or disabled.
So recognizing that that resolution has no teeth in it because there's
It's a
nothing in our
request.
bylaws.
We're sending a letter requesting that, and then I'm
So
gonna
are
make a
we
second
not
recommendation.
supporting it if it's not an accessible cab?
I won't.
Okay. So we need to know how this is worded. We will support an addition to the fleet for an accessible cab
Yes,
only.
in my mind, that's what I want forward.
I
yeah.
want to make sure that we capture that in the resolution.
Okay.
Okay. I have Councillor Boland.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you to the Director of Legislative and Administrative Services, it is my belief, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is if we don't get to say anyways. The province is going to either approve the one additional cab or they're not, regardless of, I mean, they'll take us in as a stakeholder, but that's it. Yes.
I think we're considered a significant stakeholder.
Because we wrote a letter when that new company tried to open up that they still declined.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Clausen.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think just for me, based on just the principle of the fact that even though the process may be set up this way, I think if they were preparing and had a plan to expand their fleet, they could have given us information prior to this meeting, even if they hadn't filled out the application and that timeline was short. So I would still, I probably will not vote in favor just because I don't feel like I've got enough information on background information on the cabs that are, some of the questions that we've asked, the cabs that are running the competition, how many drivers, the accessibility issues. So that's my feeling. Thank you.
Okay. So the resolution is that we send a letter in support of only an accessible cab.
Yes.
Was there a seconder?
Yes.
Councillor Hanson, one more comment?
Just to summarize, so I would like it to be, if they do a handicap or accessible, but I think it has to be voluntary. You can't put that expense on a business. Like if it's, like for a wheelchair lift, that's maybe another, I don't know, 10, 15,000 to a vehicle.
I think we can request it, and that's what we've done.
Yeah, okay, so we can do a request.
But we're not supporting it if they're not. That's what your resolution is saying. Okay.
And I don't have any information that's given to me, though, from other businesses as to why they wouldn't support it, or I haven't heard anything. But then it goes to what Councillor Clausen is saying. If they knew they were putting in this submission, then they would have had time. So I would like them to present as to why they feel it's needed.
And they may not present, but providing the information. Yeah. Okay, so the resolution as it stands is that the City Council send a letter of support for an accessible cab to be added to the fleet.
It's a good ask.
All right. So that was moved and seconded. Anything further? In favor? Opposed? Carried. And Councillor Stewart.
Your Worship, I don't know if I need to do a recommendation, but I would like
Notice of motion at the end of the,
to bring forward the, okay, then notice of motion, yes.
well, yeah, okay, so we'll just get to that at the end of the,
Thank you.
yeah.